Hello again, guys. It's Cecil again. I thought I might take a break from the bodywork for a little while and give you all a brief overview of what I'm doing with the front suspension on the car. Basically, in these cars, they've got stamped sheet metal upper control arms. They were okay in their day, but they're really prone to flexing because basically they're just sheet metal. So I looked around on some of the Mustang forums and I've come up with one of the things that they had shown, which is basically to take some heavy gauge steel and cut the plates out and weld them underneath. It's not quite as good as tubular control arms, but right now that's just not in my budget. I've got the steel at the scrapyard for almost nothing. So it's really costing me a little bit of time, and if later I decide I do want to upgrade to the tubular control arms, it's no big deal, just a couple hours worth of work and it all comes apart. So I figured I'd give it a shot and see how it works out. But anyway, I got my plates cut out of the 1/8 inch steel, took my plasma cutter, which I'm still kind of rusty with it, so it looks kind of bad. But kept trimming them down a little bit at a time until I got them to fit on the control arm relatively well. And then got the holes and stuff cut out so that the ball joint and everything would actually sit down in there. You actually have to cut a hole out in that piece of steel, kind of up in this area right here, so that the back side of that ball joint will actually sit down flush with this piece of plate. This is also bent on an angle so that when you get back to here, this is at a slight incline, excuse me, so that you're actually boxing that in a little bit. This will actually be raised up just a tad. And then these angle gussets get welded down on the corners to kind of fill that in, and that also helps stiffen the rest of this up. Then there's actually a bolt assembly which goes through here with bearings and stuff on it with two other bolts which go into the shock tower, and that's what the whole assembly pivots on. Once you flip it upright, then you have your spring perches which go through the bolt holes in the top of it. So I've still got to drill a couple of holes on either side of this in order for my nuts to come through for those spring perches. Speaking of those, original ones from the Ford factory had like a cast-in rubber synthetic something or another in these, and you couldn't hardly move those things back and forth. So as such, the front suspension on these cars, the Falcons, a lot of the other mid-size Fords in that era, were very stiff. Not to mention the fact that when you go around curves and stuff, it would squeak. Well, a lot of guys tried the polyurethane bushings. They gave you a better ride, but yet again, they're real prone to squeaking. So there's a gentleman on one of the websites I visit which actually has a kit where you drill out the entire back side of these. He sends you two bearings, a piece of steel or lightweight steel tubing, and you basically weld all that in there, and then set your bearings in place and actually peen the edge of that sheet metal over to retain that bearing. The center bolt is about the only thing you reuse off of your old one, so you have to cut that apart to get it out. And then you have to basically take a press and push that spindle through there. And once you do, it's a pretty tight fit. But as you can see, once you set this thing in here, I mean, there's tons of freedom of movement. This is really going to free up a lot of energy in the front suspension and keep it from squeaking. You pair that with new springs, that's going to drop the front end of the car approximately 1/2 inch. These are a slightly lighter weight spring than what was in the car originally. The one on the left is the original spring. The one on the right is my replacement spring. I cannot remember what the rate of these are. I bought them about 6 years ago, and they've been in the box ever since collecting dust. But you pair that with the upper control arm lowering of the holes to increase the camber on the wheels. That's actually going to give the car a pretty nice stance. At least I hope it will. This is the old front spindle and old lower control arm off the car. As you see, it's pretty grody. I'm going to be upgrading disc brakes on the front. Actually, another conversion. It's from a Fairmont or Granada, that type thing. There again, you can do better brake systems, but they're quite a bit more money. This car is not going to be a race car or anything like that, and if I decide later on to go to a better brake system, I can. But I do feel that disc brakes of even Ford origin are better than drum brakes. You can see here, this is my new lower control arm. I took the existing strut rods, which go to the radiator support up at the front of the car, and modified them as well. I had to take them to a machine shop to have them cut down, and this piece right here is actually what they cut off. Ford's idea of this was basically to use this piece on the back side, then this piece of rubber, then there's a metal bushing in here, and this sandwiches on either side of that front strut rod mount. Then you had the other piece of rubber, this washer, and then a large nut. Well, the problem is once you sandwich all this down together, this stuff, I wish you could see, is very, very hard. I mean, you can take and bounce this stuff. I mean, it's almost like polyurethane. So that basically limited almost any movement of your lower control arm because that had it in a bind. Well, my solution, again, I found on the internet, was to cut this down and have the ends of it threaded, and then put one of these swedged threaded sleeves, which I think I got from Speedway Motors, and this little clevis right here, and it will go through that front strut rod mount with another washer and some Loctite on that grade 8 bolt. And what happens is this will actually give you a lot more freedom of movement, so that will basically make this entire lower control arm move up and down a lot more freely. So there again, that's going to actually help the suspension to operate like it should. The only bad thing about these lower control arms are they've only got one mounting point, which is right at the very bottom right here. Yet again, these are stamped sheet metal even though they're new. So another upgrade that I found was again on the same website, taking some relatively thick sheet metal, cutting it out to fit, and then placing that over this. They actually put theirs on the inside of that, and I didn't like the way that looked. I'm actually going to keep trimming mine down to where it's actually going to sit flush on the outside of it. I still got a little bit more work to do on this one to get it to sit down on there correctly, but I feel that that's actually going to strengthen it even more. And then once that's welded, I'm actually going to take it and wrap it all the way around this end up to here, completely boxing it in. You know, like I said, the aftermarket control arms and stuff are, you know, far superior to this, but again, it's not quite in my budget at this point. This stuff wasn't that expensive. I think I got the entire front suspension kit with the springs, the ball joints, and everything else. You know, $200 or $300 or something like that. I also got a 1-inch front sway bar to go on it whenever it's done. So I figure a little of my sweat and some extra scrap metal that I can accumulate and give this a shot and see how it works. Once all this is put together, I think it's going to be a pretty good system. You know, only time will tell. Once I get it all in the car, I may like it, I may hate it. You know, but at that point, you know, it's suspension. It's a lot easier to take apart and redo if you don't like it than the body work and the paint. So I figured I'd give this a shot and see what happens. So as I progress along with this further and actually start getting some of this stuff assembled on the car, I'll be sure to make another video for you. Thank you all again for the great comments and the wonderful information that you all have given me. I look forward to hearing more of it, and I will see you guys later.